Got it. Okay, thanks everyone. This is James Owen. I'm the Executive Director of Renew Missouri. What's critical to this presentation is Renew Missouri is also a part of the Rural Power Coalition. That's a group of activists and advocates from around the country who worked on securing funding for rural electric cooperatives to be able to take advantage of USDA funds, grants, loans, in order to help them with a clean energy transition. That money was in the Inflation Reduction Act, around 40 billion of it. And so ultimately, the questions that we hope to answer today are what those programs are and how they can benefit not just cooperatives, but member owners as well as businesses in those service territories as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this kind of talks about why this is important. One of the things that you need to understand is electric cooperatives they tend to have around the country, and particularly in Missouri, a kind of a over-reliance on coal and gas. One of the reasons why they have such an over-reliance is because they don't receive the same kind of financing that, let's say, an investor-owned utility like Ameren or Evergy has, where they are able to go secure those funds from banks or from shareholders in their stock. Largely, they are reliant on the payments of their member owners, and they are, charged with kind of keeping those low. And so the USDA is empowered to help borrow money to build plants. And so that creates a problem with trying to make sure that they are able to keep up with that infrastructure. So we've always tried to look to government solutions for helping the co-ops with that. And what we've been able to get over the past couple of years from Congress and from the Biden administration is there are financial opportunities under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, $1 billion for rural and remote opportunities, $3 billion for the smart grid. And then with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to be our focus today, we have $9.7 billion for renewable energy systems, zero emission systems, and carbon capture systems, $1 billion for renewable energy infrastructure loans, $500 million for biofuel handling infrastructure grants, and around $2 billion for REAP, which we will get into that, in addition to tax credits. And more importantly, it's not just the tax credits that are critical here, but they are the cash equivalent of a tax credit, given that the rural electric cooperatives are nonprofits and do not pay taxes in the same way that, let's say, an Ameren does as a private for-profit company. We'll also talk about how that community engagement is going to happen, and then what the next steps are. So next slide after that. Okay, why is it critical? Okay. This is kind of giving you a sense. And by the way, I know this is probably going to be a question that's asked. We are going to provide these slides to all participants today. I'd also note that if you are seeking CLE credit and you need a certificate, I've already had one person ask for a certificate, but if you need a certificate, just let us know. I don't normally give those out unless they're asked, so we'll make sure we provide those. This is kind of a messy map, but honestly, kind of the way the co-ops are situated, whereas they are serving rural areas and not urban centers, is going to be a little piecemeal. So that's why this looks like that. And they have 55,000 or more than 55,000 megawatts of fossil fuel generating capacity online today. Next slide, please. And that's according to 2016 numbers. They own 16,000 megawatts of coal plant capacity with no retirement date. And one thing you might notice on this chart is that two of these are in Missouri, Thomas Hill and New Madrid. And Philip, would you mind taking over for just one quick second, please, for the next slide?
Yeah, I can do.
Right.
So yeah, as you can see, we also have the list of states and other plants, and their owner, the co-op that has the largest stake in each of these plants across the country that these programs will help to close and transition. There we go. So our co-ops today are selling about $40 billion worth of electricity to about 40 million people in 47 states. There are 897 co-ops in total. And as we showed in the previous slide, a lot of these are members within the larger G&Ts that are throughout the country. So just to go back, those 897 are within these G&Ts here throughout the country. So they get pretty far out. So 85% of the generation from plants owned by co-ops is fossil fueled. As you can see here, it's a pretty heavy mix on coal, followed by natural gas, and followed by nuclear. And then we have the very small renewable percentage there that they're working on growing. And a big part of this, as we mentioned, they were ineligible for clean energy tax credits. So they were not really able to partake and participate in all of those benefits that other utilities were able to, and private developers were able to take advantage of to invest in clean energy projects. So we're really feeling quite positive about the IRA and being able to change this, and we'll get into that later in the presentation. So just even looking at the most carbon intensive utilities in general, the co-ops are not doing very well. This chart here shows the top 100 electric utilities in the US ranked by their carbon intensity. The highlighted ones here on the bottom are all co-ops. So as you can see, they're near the front of these large utilities. So just looking at the industry as a whole, they're kind of being laggards right now compared to their larger counterparts who are making more of an effort to transition and invest in renewable energy, have a more diversified portfolio. And it's something that we're not really seeing aggressively from the co-ops quite yet. So one thing that we've done in our partnership with the Rural Power Coalition is really look at the governance of the distribution co-ops. So the member co-ops within the larger G&Ts, and seeing why this is that they've had this resistance to renewable energy investment and really not embracing clean energy like munis and IOUs across Missouri have already started to do. So one thing that we did as a coalition is drive in RECA, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, to look at their governance and to create this governance task force report to really evaluate basic conditions between different co-ops. Even just looking at Missouri co-ops, there's a wide variety of transparency and participation within their democracy and governance practices at each co-op. Some are very transparent. They have very open voting processes. You can do mail-in voting, proxy voting, go in and vote 30 days ahead of time before their actual annual meeting where they hold the election in person. There are others that have none of this online. None of it's available unless you go there in person to ask. Some of them don't have any additional voting options. So we really have a very large range. So because of this, many of our members in the Rural Power Coalition have been creating scorecards of their co-ops and really evaluating not only their energy options and access to clean energy programs, but also how accessible are they to their member owners? Can they vote? Can they participate? And a lot of their governance practices are not. So here's an example from one of our partners, Appalachian Voices out of Tennessee, who put this one together, and they have a lot of those hosted on their site, energydemocracyyall.com. And we also have our own scorecard from Missouri that we're going to be releasing this summer in our upcoming newsletter. So you'll be able to see where all of ours are ranked too. So as we mentioned, Rural Power Coalition was a big partner in getting all of this done. Strong advocates for equitable access to electricity, for clean energy programs, having more transparent and democratic operations at co-ops. And a big piece of this too has been broadband access, something that we hear from people all across the state, and getting input from member owners in Missouri, and is really just popular across the country in getting access to high-speed internet for folks in rural places. And a big piece of this too is we're wanting to make sure a lot of these federal investments are done at the local level, that rural communities are getting direct benefits from energy efficiency and clean energy projects, and really looking to cite those within their service areas. So how did we get to where we're at? So starting back in 2020, NRECA had an ask for a $10 billion bailout for LIHEAP funding specifically for member owners. So that got us thinking, well, instead of doing just a blanket bailout, what can we do to actually solve the problem and fix the issue that is causing these folks to have issues paying their bills in the first place? So we did some analysis and saw that it would cost about $100 billion to transition our entire rural electric system owned by the co-ops out of coal and natural gas and really into those renewable energy alternatives. So that's what we asked for. We didn't get 100 billion, we got 10 billion, but as you can see here, we had a pretty detailed reason as to why we need it. If you're looking at $1 per watt for 57,000 megawatts of replaced fossil fuel generation with at least 10% for economic support to workers and communities affected by the plant closures, we're going to need $57 billion. Then we're looking at an additional 35 billion for energy efficiency and beneficial electrification upgrades for households served by co-ops. And I was looking at specifically 5 million households there, 8 billion for the 2.8 EV chargers, which will also help in increasing electric usage and capacity for our co-ops, and also looking at the bill relief, which NRECA asked for as well, to help folks out of the pandemic. So ultimately, this did not pass, and we did not get all of this, but we did get the bulk of it and the 10 billion that we asked for. So a big piece, and the biggest piece of that, is now named as New Era. Empowering Rural America is the official program. It was 22004 in the Federal Registry in the actual bill text of this program, but now this is the official name that the USDA and Rural Utility Service has given to this program. It's how it's going to show up moving forward. There are already fact sheets on it, webinars are going on, and a lot of information's coming out. We're getting a lot of clarity. So really the big programs that we're going to talk about today and are really helpful for rural co-ops in some munis out of the IRA are these programs. So New Era, PACE, not to be confused with Property Assessed Clean Energy, RESP, REAP, and direct pay tax credits. This is also the largest investment in rural electric cooperatives since the Rural Electrification Act of 1936. The New Era program is going to fund $9.7 billion in direct loans and grants to fund rural electric cooperative investments in renewable energy, energy efficiency, carbon capture, and sequestration plant conversion projects. From projections we've seen, this $9.7 billion can be leveraged up to $40 billion if co-ops are fully leveraging the combination of both loans and forgivable grants from RUS and applying for these funds and proposing projects within this program. It's exclusively for co-ops and includes the following classifications for those that are still RUS borrowers and even those who have left. So it's existing or former RUS borrowers. So again, if someone was previously paid off their loan and doesn't have an active loan and is no longer working with them, they can still come back and apply for the program. Those who borrowed of the former Rural Electrification Administration, which was the agency prior to RUS being made within USDA. So even if it was, decades ago when a group applied for this, they're still eligible now. The co-ops have to serve predominantly rural areas. It's defined, predominantly rural is defined as a service territory where at least 50% of the consumers are rural, and it also has to be a wholly or jointly owned subsidiary of a rural electric co-op. So continued here, to create opportunities for electric co-ops of all sizes and to ensure co-ops compete only against their peers of similar stature, New Era applications are separated into these three categories. So these are really just defined by the total utility plant value at these different metrics. So 500 million is going to be the big bucket at the top. Then we're going to have the middle range of 200 to 500 million. And then these smaller plant applications will be looking at the less than 200 million range. So to be eligible, applicants must demonstrate that the proposed project is eligible, financially and technically feasible, affordable, and reliable. If an applicant is selected, they'll be required to provide reasonable, adequate security for their financial investments. and all projects that are selected must be completed and verified by September 30th of 2031. So the program is going to be live next March, March 1st, 2024, and applicants will have 5 years to complete the projects after the environmental review has been completed. In Missouri, this typically takes 2 years for projects to be approved. So it seems very likely that if you got an application in, you get selected, you're going to be looking at 2026 as your start date, which would give utilities until 2031 to finish the project and commence all spending. Funds can be used to make energy efficiency improvements to eligible generation and transmission systems. We're working on getting clarification of this because we heard that this might not be the case from a staffer on a call last week, but I heard this morning that that's going to be corrected on a USDA webinar later this afternoon, talking about this specifically. So we should be able to see funds used for energy efficiency improvements and larger system investments for things like on-bill financing, like a pay-as-you-save type program that our co-ops could offer within these applications as a use of the funds they receive. They can also be used to purchase, build, or deploy renewable energy. So that could be buying it from a third party, building it themselves, or tying into an existing system and taking advantage of that. So there's a lot of flexibility here in how co-ops can participate in the program. Zero emission systems is going to be defined as, again, energy efficiency, looking at distributed energy solutions for access to renewable energy within zero emission systems. So there's a lot of room for creativity on that piece as well. And then we'll also be looking at carbon capture storage systems or the direct purchase of renewable energy. So again, it's designed to be flexible. The main priority from USDA and RUS is greenhouse gas emission reductions. So they're really more interested on the total emission reductions. They don't really care how applicants are getting there. That is the biggest scoring metric of anything given in these applications, is ultimately greenhouse gas emissions. So again, looking back at that chart we showed, there's a lot of opportunity for the higher co-ops there, the ones that are still very coal reliant and natural gas reliant, to get away from those assets. And if they put in a strong application, they have a very good shot of getting selected, because again, they will have the highest score with that emissions reduction. And one piece of this that's also pretty interesting is that funding can be used for diversifying purchase power mixes that currently exist, can manage stranded assets, and generally boost the transition to clean energy. So they're really looking at this from every angle of, maximum flexibility. They don't really care how you do it. Just please get reductions any way you see fit, and they want to give money for these activities. So again, these applications will be scored and ranked on the greatest reduction in cost per unit measure of greenhouse gases. Projects going to look at reliability, resiliency, and affordability. And they also have to be able to recover quickly following an unexpected disruption. The cost of unit reduction will be considered. USDA is encouraging applicants to swing for the fences and to think ambitiously in these applications. So they'd rather people throw in way more and everything in the kitchen sink than just do kind of a small, safe bid. They really want people to go after everything they can here. They're also going to be looking at jobs and economic opportunity out of these projects and to improve the quality of life in rural communities. But again, the highest piece is going to be on the emissions. The other key piece here is that funding is capped at 10% of total funding and $970 million for each individual borrower. So they will not be granting anything beyond that at this point. They have discretion. So USDA could do so if there's some super ambitious projects that would need more than that, and they're not getting as many applications as they would like. They could happen. But as of right now, I would say just bet on 970 being your cap. So that is new era. There's a lot more information coming out. There are a lot of webinars still going on. So there's more information that's going to be coming up and available to folks that are interested. But as of right now, that's all that is available on the website that we just shared here. And we're also going to make these slides available with you all if you need to get a recap on any of that. So the next piece we have here is PACE, which is powering affordable clean energy, not to be confused with CPACE or PACE property assessed clean energy that we have in Missouri already. This was originally going to be ACE. At the last second, they added the P to it. I wish they hadn't, because that can be confusing for folks. But just so you know, if you hear PACE with IRA, this is what we're talking about. So this program is looking at the use of clean, reliable energy to be more affordable for rural Americans. RUS will forgive up to 60% of loans for renewable energy projects and renewable energy storage projects, including for wind, solar, hydro, and geothermal projects. The funding is at $1 billion for the whole program. The maximum available loan they will give is $100 million, including a forgivable portion, and the minimum they will give is $1 million. So the project must be based on a bankable power purchase agreement through a financial guarantee that ensures the financial feasibility of the project. Energy must be sold for resale to eligible off-takers, and technologies used must be commercially available. So things like SMRs or green hydrogen, anything that's a little more experimental and being worked out would not be eligible for this program. So to be eligible, applicants must also demonstrate that they have the rurality component. So 50% of the population has to be served by this proposed renewable energy project, living in communities with populations of 20,000 or less. This is also eligible to smaller municipal utilities. It's not just a co-op issue, but looking in Missouri, all of our larger municipal utilities would not meet this. Some of the smaller ones that don't really generate much of their own power and are really just buying power through agreements elsewhere would be eligible for this program. Applicants can generate electricity for resale to residents in both rural and non-rural areas. So again, if you're looking at a muni that has a pretty rural area they serve, but they're near a larger municipality, they could resell some of that electricity to those folks. Applicants must also demonstrate that the proposed project is financially and technically feasible, securable, and funding, reliable and resilient. Again, really looking at, can they recover quickly following a disruption, really thinking about extreme weather events, some of which we've had in recent years, and making sure the system will be able to make it through those situations. Also needs to be affordable. There's no point in going through all of this if you're going to have a rate increase from these projects. Percentage of loan forgiveness depends on the type of community the proposed project will serve. That is really looking at types of communities that are listed as environmental communities, or having a large population of low income customers that are going to get benefits from this program. You're more likely to get a larger grant or get a grant awarded for forgiveness if you're looking at some of those additional adders. And we're going to talk about some of that later in the presentation as well. And the interest rate is determined by RUS and is in effect at time of the advance. So that's still going to be pretty favorable because we're looking at the federal rate there. So PACE has 3 application categories. Category 1 provides up to 20% total loan forgiveness if the applicants meet minimum set of standards set forth in the notice of funding opportunity. Provides up to 40% total loan forgiveness if the project is or serves 50% or more of the population of a designated energy community, a disadvantaged community, or a distressed community. There are many different ways to figure out if you were looking at one of these. The EPA Environmental Justice Mapping Tool is one that'll show energy communities that are already marked as distressed and eligible for additional funding. For the disadvantaged and distressed community definitions, there are some income verification guidelines to look at that. And then for category 3, provides up to 60% total loan forgiveness if the project is located in U.S. territories or in compact of free association areas, or serves tribal populations of 60% or greater, or is owned by a tribal government. These loan terms are also for 35 years. So again, can be pretty ambitious, good terms, and a large chunk of it can be forgiven if you're in one of these groups. So other big program that we got here, which is a new program, is the Rural Energy Savings Program. We had it back in 2014, but is now having a more aggressive look at clean energy projects, and provides loans to entities who provide energy efficiency services in rural areas that agree to make affordable loans to help consumers implement cost-effective energy efficiency measures. They have to help lower energy bills for rural families and businesses, and they have to reduce barriers to investment in energy efficiency projects or activities. This can be used and has been used in some examples for things like pay-as-you-save, on-bill finance, tariff programs to offer to member owners. So direct loans to co-ops available to them. This is available right now and does not have an end date at the moment. Funds may be used to implement energy saving measures or to help reduce energy costs incurred by qualified customers. Eligible applicants include, again, it's very open to former and current RUS borrowers. This is also open to subsidiaries of current or former borrowers. So it's really opening up the pool of potential participants here, including folks who are just working for or working with a co-op to implement a program. They don't necessarily have to be a co-op themselves to offer this kind of a program. Any entities that provide retail electric service in rural areas, and any other entities that provide or propose to provide eligible purposes for RESP, including energy efficiency, renewable energy, energy storage, or energy conservation measures and related services, improvements, financing, or relending. So this is going to be on a first come, first served basis until funds are depleted. Again, there's not an expiration date. It's just they're going to be giving it out until it dries up. So the other new program that was retooled is REAP, Rural Energy for America program, provides guaranteed loan financing and grant funding to ag producers and rural small businesses for renewable energy systems or to make energy efficiency improvements. So this was first opened up in March of this year. That window has closed, and it had a much larger project pool of funding available for the earlier applicants. It's still available now, but the amount available is a lot lower than it was in the previous round of applications. So that might hamper some of the larger farming equipment to be accessible through this. But again, a lot of these other benefits can still be applied for. So it's really looking at helping increase American energy independence by increasing the private sector supply of renewable energy and by decreasing the demand for energy through energy efficiency improvements. Over time, these investments can also help lower the cost of energy costs for small businesses and ag producers. So type of funding available, we're looking at a loan guarantee on loans up to 75% of total eligible project costs, grants up to 50% of total eligible project costs, and a combined grant and loan guarantee up to 75% of total eligible project costs. Funds can be used for renewable energy systems. And here, this also is looking at biomass. So biodiesel, ethanol, solid fuels, anaerobic digesters would all apply. Geothermal for electric generation or direct use in a home or business would also apply. And hydro, if it's below 30 megawatts, would also be applicable. Funds can also be used to buy, build, and install energy efficiency improvements such as high efficiency heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, HVAC, switching from a diesel to an electric irrigation motor, and electric, solar, or gravity pumps for sprinkler pivots. So who can apply? Ag producers with at least 50% of their gross income coming from agricultural operations, small businesses in eligible rural areas, and applicants must have no outstanding delinquent federal taxes, debt, judgment, or debarment to be eligible. And what is an eligible area for this program? Businesses must be located in rural areas with populations of 50,000 or fewer. This is a little more generous than the previous program having that 20,000 or fewer cap for PACE. So this is something that can be a little better for places that are still rural, but not as quite small as some of those other areas. Ag producers can also be located in rural or non-rural areas, and applications for this program are accepted year-round. Again, it's going to be smaller in what they're looking to fund. I want to say it was around $8,000 for these rounds of funding, while the initial round, which will be a reoccurring program through 2031, will be a lot larger. So that is what we have for those four main buckets here. The next piece that is very helpful and quite the game changer for the co-ops is the direct pay tax credit. So the IRA created a new mechanism called direct pay for tax exempt entities, including co-ops, to be able to directly access many of these incentives. So previously, as I'm sure many of you were aware of, nonprofit entities and co-ops themselves could not directly benefit from the PTC and ITC tax credits. This has now changed. This is really going to shift how we've seen projects done before. We have one here in town from Boone Electric here in Columbia. They put up a community solar system back in 2015, and they had to go into a very complicated leasing arrangement with Shelter Insurance to be able to get that tax credit realized by Shelter. They're going to be selling back the solar system to Boone in 2040 when the contract has expired, and they will then own their discounted solar system. So now that we have this, Co-ops are not going to have to do that, and they're not going to have to look for an eligible taxable entity that wants to take advantage of the tax credits. They're not going to have to do these super complicated arrangements to get access to it. They can just get it directly. So this is changing in that they're going to just get a check from the federal government for the amount, which is why we get the direct pay, because they're just directly paying these entities because they're not going to be able to give it to them in terms of a tax break. So this is going to be eligible to local governments, public utilities, and rural electric cooperatives to pursue renewable energy projects on their own without having to rely on outside financing. And this is giving them an even playing field with the private sector. It's even better in some cases for these co-ops when we're looking at all these various funding opportunities. You can take a loan for any of these projects here, looking at New Era, looking at PACE, RESP, REAP, any of them, and you can get these stackable tax credits with your loan of any of these projects. So that's really why we're looking at this can give $40 billion worth of assistance if you're really maximizing forgivable loans and grants and getting as many tax credit savings you can get in the projects. So in addition to the base 30% that we have for these tax credits, we can get up to 80% in rural communities if you're taking full advantage of adders. Some of them are not fully transferable. If you might not be able to have both a designated energy community, a low-income community, and a qualified low-income residential building project all within one area. But in some cases, you can definitely get a handful of those. One that is accessible to everybody is the domestic sourcing. Any of these projects, if they're domestically sourced, will get another 10%. So you're looking at 40% if you just adhere to the Buy American, Build American provision. Co-ops are actually not required, as other groups are, to follow that, but they are encouraged to still do so, and will get rewarded with another 10% with the domestic sourcing piece if they go ahead and seek that out. And again, you're looking at another 10% on the projects located in designated energy communities, and the low-income communities and qualified low-income residential building projects have higher percentages that they can add on. So again, if you look at 80%, it's direct pay tax credit, plus if you have this set up as a forgivable loan, some co-ops could get extremely large investments and large amounts of renewable energy and not have to pay much of it back at all. So as part of this, we've had Justice 40 come up as a key component of all programs receiving federal funding in the Inflation Reduction Act. So there is a clear federal commitment to equity and inclusion in all of these projects. So to kick things off in this new commitment, the Biden administration issued this executive order in early 2021 on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. So all projects have to have a Justice 40 lens, and 40% of program funding has to go towards Justice 40 communities. So this will be looking at underserved communities through different metrics. The recent census is very helpful in identifying these. There are also a lot of really great tools from the EPA available right now to see if a community qualifies or not. Many of the rural areas that we're looking at do qualify. As we showed in one of the previous slides, 90% of rural electric cooperative service territory is serving areas of persistent poverty. So again, a lot of these communities are going to benefit for at least some of these extra tax credits here and additional considerations for selection. Unfortunately, none of the programs right now have Justice 40 as a criteria for a scoring metric, but they are going to be looking at it in terms of where they're awarding projects, and 40% of this funding, all of these programs funding, has to go to Justice 40 communities based on this executive order. So this was then administered to all agencies. Here we have a commitment for interagency coordination between USDA and the Department of Energy on going forward and administering all these programs. We're advising to establish a place-based model to deliver federal rural development resources. USDA will establish a place-based all-of-government model to ensure rural communities benefit from targeted partnership with a collaborative network of multiple federal agencies and programs. Agencies will lay out a plan for ongoing stakeholder engagement to inform program implementation planning and garner ongoing feedback. And they are having their commitment to interagency collaboration USDA agencies will identify areas for coordination with others in the federal family, which is mainly being DOE, Department of Energy, and USDA, making sure all of these energy programs are well coordinated and make sense for applicants. So Justice 40, first time in our nation's history, the federal government has made it a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of these federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by pollution. So what kind of investments fall within it? Categories of investment are climate change, clean energy and energy efficiency, clean transit, affordable and sustainable housing, training and workforce development, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, and the development of critical clean water and wastewater infrastructure. So really, if we participate in Justice 40, if say AECI wants to apply for the New Era program, if they're looking at say New Madrid, we know that there is an issue of an underserved minority population there that is quite close to the coal plant itself. So if they were applying and looking at closing the New Madrid plant, they would definitely check the Justice 40 boxes in seeking participation in the program. And USDA programs that were live prior to the Justice 40 executive order are included. And we know now that all our IRA programs that are going to be administered through this lens. And there's even a call for community benefit plans within all applications that we'll go into here shortly. So as part of this, in addition to the EPA tool, there's also the Geospatial Climate and Economic Justice Screening tool, and it will be published annually with interactive maps highlighting disadvantaged communities. You can go there at this link that we have at the bottom here, screeningtool.geoplatform.gov. That's available now, still up. Again, between that and the EPA mapping tool, we have a pretty good idea of where Justice 40 communities are, and if you're targeting the right area with these programs. So here we have a screenshot from this mapping tool, and as you can see, Missouri has quite a bit of these gray dots here. So we have a pretty good opportunity, even looking around St. Louis, looking around Kansas City, all parts of southern Missouri, east to the west. Even some parts of central Missouri there can get benefits from this program. So we're really hopeful that Missouri will take this seriously and we'll get a lot of participation from across the state in these programs. So how do we assure community engagement? So the Department of Energy held rounds of engagement from registered participants to present and funding opportunity process and to give opportunities for engagement. This is their normal form of engagement. This is coming out from last year in 2022, having the RFI, getting response to it, having notice of intent, getting responses, having the funding announcement, so on and so forth. And this round to fast track New Era and a lot of these other programs to be spent and already start rolling them out proactively to prevent any kind of cuts or changes from Congress. They decided to forego these first two rounds that normally happen in this process, and instead did a 2-hour listening session that's already happened. They also had a comment period and then close things up. As of right now, you can still apply and submit comments on regulations.gov for the New Era program and for IRA programs in general, but that's going to be closing up at the end of June. So if you have any strong feelings on any of these programs and would like to see things changed, you can still get input in through that way. And we're also seeing these webinars actively happening right now through the end of the month and through the start of July from USDA to give more details on applications for all the programs. But if you're wanting to see any rule changes or any comprehensive changes to any of the programs, regulations.gov is really the only way to get any input in at this time, other than directly lobbying Congress. So within all of these plans, and to have a strong application for USDA programs, every application needs to have a community benefit plan. They aren't going to be scored on Justice 40. They're not going to be scored on the community benefit plans themselves. They're, again, only looking at greenhouse gas emission reductions, but they are going to consider it, and they do care about community impact and how it's going to be rolled out. So all the Department of Energy projects will require a community benefit plan, and worthwhile for communities to consider if they're wanting to get funding from USDA, RUS, and DOE programs for clean energy projects over the next decade. So again, for folks who want to really maximize the benefits here and are wanting to look at, getting highest amount of tax credit that you can get, and also looking at getting a forgivable grant and loan combination as part of this, you really want to have a community benefit plan in your application. There are 4 core policy priorities in them. You only need to include one, but again, I think it would be good to do all 4 if you're going through the effort of making one and putting in an application. The first is investing in America's workforce, engaging communities and labor is the second one. Third one is advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in some way, and accessibility with your project. And then the last one being implementing Justice 40 priorities as part of the project. So these, again, should be incorporated comprehensively into project proposals and will help, broadly share prosperity in the clean energy transition. Also just generally good to ensure that things are being rolled out in an equitable fashion and that everyone's being served best by these programs and this, groundbreaking generational federal assistance that we're seeing here. Community benefit plans are intentionally flexible, just like a lot of the programs and applications we've been sharing today, so they can generate the best approaches from applicants and their partners. These plans should be specific, actionable, and measurable. And there is guidance for existing programs that can be found through energy.gov. There are also descriptions and details of community benefit plans for all of the USDA RUS programs that we went over today. Those can be found in the notice of funding opportunities for all the programs, but they do not have much more detail beyond what we're sharing here at this time. There is going to be more coming out in the coming months on what they would like to see. And there are going to be examples of good community benefit plans coming out as well. And we also have some partner groups that we're working with that are actively developing some mock-up and sample community benefit plans that we can share at a later date. So again, Justice 40 and New Era. So this is specifically looking at the New Era program and what they would like to see from these community benefit plans. Again, it's very similar with what I just went over. It's investments in the American workforce, looking at the local worker retraining and job creation in the community that's being targeted. We also were able to get pay as you save mentioned by name in the program. So we're looking at the launch or expansion of systemic or consumer-based energy efficiency and carbon reduction measures, such as providing on-bill financing or a pay-as-you-save program to improve the energy efficiency and beneficial electrification for consumers. In this case, it's really member owners, but put that in there just so it would be understood. Land use agricultural integration that demonstrates ways for agricultural producers to benefit from clean energy projects. This could look at things like agrovoltaics that have been, having some success in various places, looking at putting solar on retention ponds, that kind of thing. So it's also encouraging creativity in how we get some of this solar rolled out. And if you're looking at, an application that is valuing the zero energy emission systems definition in New Era and looking at doing some of these activities, it would have a very strong application in hitting the reduction requirements and also hitting the Justice 40 components of a community benefit plan. And then again, last piece is looking at diversity, equity, inclusion. It's really going to be looking at where are you serving, and that 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments flow to disadvantaged communities. So again, if it's a disadvantaged community and you're doing any of the above for 1, 2, 3 here in a plan, you're going to have a very strong application for consideration to be an awardee in the programs. So what is next? Again, regulations.gov input that's available right now for all these programs. Beyond that, the direct congressional outreach for input in programs is available. That's going to be closing up by the end of this month. There's also the debt ceiling conversations going on. So you might get lost in the fray if you reach out right now, but things should be calm, in the coming weeks around that issue. We also have a ton of webinars coming up, not just from USDA, but also the Rural Power Coalition. We're going to be putting on a lot of webinars like ours today on giving additional information on these programs. USDA is putting on assistance webinars for all different kinds throughout this month. They have some that are really focused on co-ops specifically and helping them work through some of the technical aspects of it and working to get their applications completed. They're looking at it for community advocate perspective to give us guidance on how we can help with community benefit plans being drafted and so on. And they also just have general assistance in getting set up with SAM, going through just general federal applications for grants and loans through the federal government. So they have all different kinds of technical assistance available to folks right now. There are also staff members from USDA in each state across the country that are tasked just with helping folks go through, apply, and work through these programs. So we have ground support in every state. We have help here in Missouri. So there's a lot of resources right now through USDA, and they really want to make this as accessible as possible to all interested parties. And then we're also looking at applications coming up. So through all these programs that we went through today, REAP is now available, RESP is now available, PACE, not Properties as Clean Energy, is going to be open June 30th until it is fully spent. That again is at 1 billion, so it's a lot smaller than the new ERA program, so that'll probably be spent sooner than later. So if that looks appealing, you know anyone who might be interested in that, there's a big priority in getting that done and applying for that as soon as you can at the end of June. Then for New ERA, it's going to open July 31st. Groups have until August 31st to get those applications in. And then the highest scoring applicants will be invited to submit a full application in the end of September. I believe it is September 31st. So I have a pretty tight turnaround there, and they're looking to have those awardees starting in March 1st, 2024. And again, we're going to be looking at the NEPA review, the environmental review period. Then after that has been completed, they have 5 years from that environmental review date to get all of their projects completed, done in the ground, or they will not be eligible for the forgivable grant component, forgivable loan components. They'll only be able to take out loans and have the debt if they miss those targets. So it's still pretty important to hit these deadlines, even though it can be pretty tight, even though we're looking at 2031 with the transmission backlog right now for renewable energy projects. It could, definitely be still tight to get some of this done by 2031 with how ambitious some of these projects are going to have to be. But with that, that is all I have in this presentation. So we can open it up to a Q&A if that works, James.
Yes, it does. And we do have one question that our friend Andrew from Renew Missouri asked about what we can share about any New ERA applications coming from Missouri. The official answer to that is that, as Philip just said, the applications are not yet publicly known. Our understanding is that there are going to be applications forthcoming, but we do not, that is not public information. That is just information that we have heard about this, about what the Associated Electric Cooperative would be doing in here in Missouri. And we don't know that for sure yet. We have been, one thing I can say is Renew Missouri in its advocacy efforts has been talking to AECI. We have been going around the state meeting with member owners, meeting with leadership at distributive electric cooperatives around the state. And we are spreading the word about this. We very much want them to be engaged and interested in this. We want to educate a lot of the local leaders about this so they can have information about what this is. I certainly think that one of the benefits of being able to, be able to talk about this kind of program is to also demystify it and to demystify some of the things it's doing. I think there's always a lot of misinformation about renewable energy efficiency, and to be able to talk about the benefits of it, how it can help distressed, economically disadvantaged areas. All that's really important. So we don't really have a lot of details about that, but we do know that there is a possible process that's going on with Associated Electric.
Yep. Yeah, you can see the initial applications right now with USDA. They have that available to folks to look at what they're expecting. We also know that Associated Electric has brought back a retired staffer to exclusively work on this application. So we know they're at least thinking about it, looking at it. NRECA, the National Association's CEO, Jim Matheson, was at the White House at the announcement of these programs back on May 16th and was very supportive of all co-ops going out and applying for this and participating in the programs. We also had 5 large distribution co-ops there and speak about how they would like to apply for it and are very interested. We also had a lot of support from Tri-State in advocating for these programs in the IRA. So there's a lot of support coming from the co-ops themselves in wanting to see their members applying for this and participating in the programs. So yeah, we're hopeful that ACI will make a full application for the program later on this summer.
Yeah. And I don't think this is a part of our application, but one thing that we are also doing is we are talking to industries and businesses in the AECI service territory, because one of the things that is scored for new era participation is whether or not you have corporate interest in renewables and perhaps having a direct payment. So if there are any lawyers on here or anyone who represents any corporate interest, Tim Opitz, we would love to talk to you about whether or not any of your clients have any interest in being identified as someone who would want to do that. We already have a few identified, but I think having an opportunity to help corporate customers who are in these service territories be able to meet their sustainability goals, to be able to reach their potential as far as being able to like take advantage of clean energy. That's something they've been disadvantaged doing in some of these rural areas of the state. So we are hopeful that this can help either as a way of keeping facilities in rural Missouri or attracting them there. So that's really important. So that's something else to keep in mind as well. Now, Philip, I know that there's been some talk right now. One of the things going on with the at the federal level is the Farm Bill. And there's been some concern about whether or not some of these programs are going to be cut, or some of this money is going to be cut as a result of some negotiations going around that. Do you have anything to add in regards to that? Is that something that co-ops should be worried about in applying for this money?
Yes. So there's not a concern around the Farm Bill yet. Negotiations are still ongoing. That should be wrapped up by this September. There has not been anything brought forward in that process that would reduce any funding for these programs. But the Limit, Save, Grow Act that was introduced by the House about a week and a half ago now would propose a $3 billion cut to the New Era program, bringing it down to closer to $6.7 billion in available funding, which again would not be great, because we need about $100 billion if we want to fully transition all of our co-ops away from fossil fuels and into renewable energy projects. So very hopeful that does not happen. It looks like the current deal between McCarthy and Biden would not move forward with the budget cut here. This is something that's, pretty well supported with bipartisan support all across the country. Again, co-ops have a pretty big service area across the country, so it's very popular among constituents everywhere to have funding for these programs. We also haven't seen a lot of love and funding for co-ops and co-op programs in recent years. So I don't think it would be a very good political move for a lot of these folks to look at cutting these programs. And we've been talking to a lot of our members of Congress as well about the importance of keeping this program funding where it's at. And if we do anything to increase the amount of funding here and not to cut it. And this is also why we're seeing this date coming up so quickly on these application deadlines, because they really want to show and demonstrate the need. Because if we're able to have applications exceeding the program funding, I think it would be kind of hard to justify a budget cut when there's more demand than we can meet.
But I mean, you mentioned that budget cut was proposed in the House. I mean, do we have any sense that that is something that would survive the Senate in its current composition?
Yeah, I don't think that would get a lot of support in the Senate. So I think we're safe as of now, but this could be a fight that's brought up in the Farm Bill. Because I don't think that the legislation will pass, but that negotiation process could definitely cut all of the 4 of these programs listed here.
Okay. So it's still something to remain vigilant about and to be mindful of and to keep an eye on. Is that a yes?
Yes, yeah.
I see you
yeah,
nodding your head.
It's not done yet. And 2 other programs that are available that we didn't talk about here are the electric school bus programs and the rural broadband. So there's a very large amount of money. There are hundreds of millions of dollars available for states to get access to electric school buses for school districts. We actually have quite a bit of applications already submitted for Missouri and awardees in Missouri. So that's been very popular. And we have had, a lot of success and growth in broadband across the state, but there are still a lot of co-op service territories that don't have access to broadband. And it's something that the co-ops themselves are very supportive of and supporting their members to go after it. So if you're talking to co-ops about any of these programs, we know those are also very popular among member owners and they want to see more of that too.
Yeah, yet there are some distributive co-ops out there who have opted not to expand their broadband, as we know.
Yep.
Some around the southern border of Missouri, some that go into Arkansas, Carroll County Co-op, as an example, as we've heard that they have passed on that. So it is very important that if you are a cooperative member owner or a cooperative member owner, that they need to be in communication with their board, with their manager, and let them know that this is important to them. We always hear the cooperatives say that they were responsive to their members. They need to know what the member owners want. And Bill Roche, our solar plant developers active in Missouri and helping RACs? Well, one, I can tell you solar plant developers are active in Missouri. A lot of them are working independently to interconnect to the overall grid. In talking to the leadership of AECI, they have indicated that there is a number of solar generating facilities they are wanting to build that have been set back by, among other things, COVID, by supply chains. They have said they have lined up several hundred megawatts of solar projects that they say are forthcoming. So that's good. Now, in regards to whether they can take advantage of those, as whether they can take advantage of those solar plants that are going directly to the grid. AECI and the rural electric cooperatives are not part of any regional transmission organizations in the state. They are not a part of MISO. They are not part of Southwest Power Pool. So they are not going to be able to take advantage of those, unfortunately. And Tim Opitz asks, how about transmission lines? Any federal legislation related to transmissions to facilitate these projects? Well, we believe, Philip, and you just got off a phone call about this, that there is some conversation, or there is some proposals as part of the debt ceiling, that would allow for permitting reform for transmission, as well as some pipeline projects, which is going to be controversial. But that is under review. It's ongoing.
Yeah. There's also some money in New Era for transmission efficiency upgrades. It's not to build new transmission lines, but to increase the performance of existing transmission owned and operated by co-ops is eligible as part of the kitchen sink of opportunities available to applicants.
Yeah. So that answers all those questions. According to my clock, it is 1:01. We started about 12:01, so we've given you an hour worth of information. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope you have appreciated it. We will be doing a year-end webinar on June 22nd at 8:30 a.m., starting at 8:30 a.m. and going until 3:30 p.m. So we will be sending out more information about that once we get everything finalized. And yeah, we really appreciate your time. And also remember, there is no September 31st. I just looked at that comment. Philip said that the deadline was September 31st. It'd probably be September 30th.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah. So don't tell anyone September 31st. Thank you again for listening, and we'll let you have the rest of your afternoon. And we will send those PowerPoints out. Okay. All right. Bye now.